This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Global concerns rise amid efforts by countries to step up containment measures against COVID-19. Why South Sudan is rolling out a partial lockdown despite not having any confirmed coronavirus case. And COVID-19 puts a brake on traditional wedding ceremonies in Uganda. Hello and thank you for joining us on Africa Live. I am Penina Karibe and with me in studio is Ramah. He brings us the business highlights.
That's right, Penina. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. African governments are teaming up with tech giants to fight misinformation through social media. And Egypt has revised its economic growth projections downwards due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll have the details of those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Penina.
Thank you, Ramah. We start with the latest on the COVID-19 pandemic. The World Health Organization has expressed deep concern over the rapid escalation worldwide. The pandemic has reached over 200 countries and regions with over 960,000 cases and more than 49,000 people have died. The United States has reported over 1,000 deaths in one day and over 26,000 new cases. The total number of cases in the U.S. has surpassed 216,000, the highest in the world. In Italy, more than 700 people have died, taking the death toll to over 13,000. And in Spain, the number of deaths has just surpassed 10,000. Iran, the worst hit nation in the Middle East, has reported over 50,000 cases. The Chinese mainland has reported 35 new cases, all coming from abroad. China has also reported 55 new asymptomatic cases. Meanwhile, Spain has seen a new record in virus-related fatalities for a single day. This is after the death toll rose by 950 people. New infections brought the total number of cases to over 110,000. Spain has a capacity of testing between 15,000 to 20,000 people per day. This has raised fears that those who have contracted the disease could be more. However, health authorities say that the rate of person-to-person infection has dropped to 12% from 20%.
From the beginning of the epidemic, we have had 10,003 deaths in Spain, and the increase in deaths yesterday notified to the Center of Coordination for Medical Alerts was 950. On the other hand, we can highlight that 26,000 people have been given the all clear.
In Spain, we're the third country in the world with the most cases, so unfortunately, we have to be in the situation of having more deaths. The objective is to end this as quickly as possible, so the rates do not continue to rise. It appears that things are stabilizing. The deaths will stabilize later than the cases of new symptoms. But it is true that Spain has a big number of deaths that we would like to reduce as quickly as possible.
South Sudan's government says it is putting in place measures to prevent the spread of coronavirus in the country. There are still no confirmed COVID-19 cases in South Sudan, but the country is in a partial lockdown. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
South Sudan's high-level task force working to prevent the spread of the COVID-19 has ordered all businesses to close except those that sell food. Residents have been instructed to maintain social distancing. However, more than 180,000 South Sudanese people still shelter in crowded United Nations compounds across the country. South Sudan's government is now urging those living in protection of civilian sites or POCs to reduce congestion and prevent the spread of coronavirus.
The high-level task force encourages all dwellers of POCs to come out of the POCs and start rebuilding their normal lives at the places of their choosing.
Aid agencies are warning of acute food shortages for more than 6 million people in South Sudan. 6 years of civil war ended with the formation of the new government, but the UN says a locust invasion in the country is likely to worsen the food security situation. The World Food Programme says it is positioning food in various parts of the country ahead of the rainy season. WFP says due to coronavirus, it is putting up measures to ensure a safer way of distributing food aid.
We're going to have to do it in smaller chunks, and obviously we're going to be compliant in other ways. Our staff wear personal protective equipment. We have washing stands throughout our distributions. We use sanitizer to clean hands. Everybody who's handling food is wearing gloves. So we're putting everything in place that we can to again mitigate this crisis.
The United Nations mission in South Sudan says 1.6 million children and women are already malnourished. Aid agencies say the partial lockdown due to COVID-19 will negatively impact food security situation in the country. The lockdown has already made food prices go higher and access to food has become more difficult. The government says the measures to prevent the spread of the coronavirus must be implemented. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
In Africa, the number of COVID-19 cases are rising daily. 50 nations have so far reported infections. There are now more than over 6,500 confirmed cases of coronavirus across the continent, and 441 people have recovered from the virus. According to the latest data by the Africa Center for Disease Control on COVID-19 in Africa, there are around 221 deaths reported in total. The deaths include the former president of the Republic of Congo, Jacques Joachim Yombi Opango, and Somalia's former Prime Minister Nur Hassan Hussein. Comoros, Lesotho, Sao Tome and Principe, and South Sudan are the only 4 countries yet to report a case of the virus. Now, most nations have shut their borders, closed schools and banned public gatherings to combat the virus. Let's take a look at the numbers in the regions on the continent. In North Africa, Algeria is the most affected country with 847 cases, followed by Egypt with 779 infections, and Morocco has 676 confirmed cases. West Africa has 15 countries with reported cases. Burkina Faso leads with 288 infections. Ghana and Senegal have 195 cases each, followed by Cote d'Ivoire and Nigeria. Ghana has just reported 9 new cases. The country's new total is 204. In Central Africa, 8 countries are affected by COVID-19. Cameroon has recorded a total of 286 cases, 7 deaths and 10 recoveries, while the Democratic Republic of Congo has 123 infections. In East Africa, Kenya has now reported 29 new cases. That brings the total number of infections to 110. The country has also reported 3 deaths. In the landlocked country of Rwanda, the infections have increased to 82, and the government there has extended the countrywide lockdown for 15 more days to curb the spread of coronavirus. In the south of the continent, South Africa continues to report the most cases on the continent with 1,380 infections. President Cyril Ramaphosa has launched a mass screening program for coronavirus. Mauritius has 161 cases and 6 deaths, while Botswana has reported 4 cases of COVID-19. Malawi has now confirmed its first case. The North African state of Tunisia has launched a large-scale disinfection campaign to beef up efforts against the spread of the coronavirus. Thousands of municipal agents and specialists are now working together after the curfew and during the general lockdown. CGTN's Adnet Shawashi reports.
Authorities have set up a dedicated team to disinfect and sanitize streets and public areas as a precautionary measure to contain the spread of coronavirus.
The large-scale disinfection campaign aims to contain the spread of the virus and to provide proper conditions for the epidemiological situation to improve. All state officials and agents are dedicated to this special mission.
The streets, parks and public places were emptied in the capital city Tunis. Meanwhile, the interior ministry deployed thousands of agents and modern equipment for the large-scale disinfection operation.
Water cannon and anti-riot vehicles are mobilized for a different purpose. It's a cleaning and disinfection mission. We want to sensitize citizens to the importance of the fight against coronavirus.
The operation continued for 24 hours round the clock. Tunisians woke up to clean and sanitized urban spaces.
It's both unusual and important to sanitize the city because millions are using public transport and they share public spaces. As citizens, we support the state in this national campaign to fight the coronavirus.
Experts at the National Observatory on New and Emerging Diseases shed light on the link between public transport use and the spread of the disease. All trains and buses were disinfected. Tunisians have welcomed the large-scale disinfection efforts and encouraged municipal agents and security forces. Authorities say the national campaign will continue. Municipal agents will also disinfect banks, public buildings, police stations and markets. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says more than 134 facilities in the country have been identified for coronavirus quarantine, isolation and treatment. But ventilators are in short supply and Ethiopia is seeking external help. CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi reports from Addis Ababa.
Orbit Healthcare Solutions, an importer of medical supplies in Ethiopia, says it is getting more demand for ventilators, with the government expressing need for over 200 urgently. The mechanical breathing device is important to save patients whose lungs are affected by COVID-19 virus. But the company cannot meet demand.
The ventilators are now increasing in price, dramatically increasing in price. Also the shipments, since every countries are locked down, some of the countries are locked down, the cargo, the shipments, we're not finding any shipments in the other one. The quality of the products available in the market, they are not certified, they are not calibrated. So it's a big issue here.
Bilisuma says the cost of a ventilator has now gone up from about $12,000 to over $27,000. Ethiopia says it has at least 435 functioning ventilators currently, including those that have been procured recently. And with a plan of over 1,000 isolation beds, more of these machines are needed. Businessman Addis Alemayo has now launched a campaign seeking medical equipment assistance from China. His business is feeling the impact of COVID-19. His workers are forced to stay at home. Ethiopia's government is also calling for help. It has launched a mobilization drive seeking assistance from citizens at home and abroad for cash and medical supplies such as ventilators. Coletta Njohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
You're watching Africa Live. Time for a quick break. When we return, Somalia fears insecurity could hamper its efforts to contain the coronavirus outbreak. And charity organizations deliver emergency food supplies to the disadvantaged in South Africa.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. Along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. As the world remains focused on containing the spread of the coronavirus, Somalia has been trying to battle extremist groups at the same time. But there are increasing concerns that insecurity may hamper efforts to contain the COVID-19 outbreak. From Mogadishu, CGTN's Abdulaziz Belu has more.
An attack earlier this week claimed the life of a governor in Garowe, the administrative capital of the Puntland state. Militant group Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility as the country ramps up anti-epidemic measures against COVID-19. The latest cases are in Somaliland after 2 individuals, including a foreigner, tested positive.
Somalia,
just like Syria and Iraq, needs a different approach. It's very hard to quarantine entire regions that are not under your control. The biggest challenge is the restriction of movement in some parts of the country. This means medical or awareness teams cannot travel to areas due to security challenges.
On the ground, medical teams are working on increasing awareness among the public. But with a weak health system, coupled by restriction in movement, experts say a potential outbreak in the country could be catastrophic. Government forces have in recent months retaken strategic towns and villages from militant group Al-Shabaab in efforts to boost security. Health officials have been dispatched to these newly liberated areas to educate the population on the importance of hygiene as the first line of defense in the fight against coronavirus.
Providing medical care to the sick and preventing people from contracting the virus is an issue on its own. We are susceptible and vulnerable to any disease. Even with support, we cannot contain any potential outbreak. We cannot compare ourselves to other countries due to our weak health system.
On Wednesday, 82-year-old Nur Hassan Hussein, a former prime minister from 2007 to 2009, died at a London hospital days after contracting the virus, prompting authorities to extend travel restrictions.
Tackling this disease requires combined efforts from the federal government and the regional states. Until further notice, we have banned local and international flights. Schools and universities will also remain closed as we enforce a ban on all public gatherings due to the nature of this contagious disease.
Meanwhile, a ban on public gatherings is yet to take place. Mosques remain open, but religious learning institutions remain closed as the Horn of Africa nation seeks to contain the outbreak. Abdul Aziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Community organizations are stepping up efforts to deliver emergency food supplies to the poorest people in South Africa. Almost half of the population in the country lives below the breadline, putting them at risk. The number of coronavirus cases has increased to over 1,300, but the death rate is still relatively low. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
It's an early start for these Rays of Hope volunteers in sprawling Alexandra Township. They're preparing food parcels for those who have no means of getting by during lockdown.
We launched a campaign called #HopeForAlex to try and get South Africa, the communities, to donate money, to donate food that we can actually distribute to the families, to the most vulnerable people in Alexandra.
The township is crowded. People live close together with poor water and sanitation services, making it difficult to distance from each other. Any help is welcome.
If I wouldn't get this food, it will be bad for my family because the food helps me a lot.
Sikumbuzu lives with his mom and siblings. None of them are working. Their daily struggle means they have no luxuries.
I don't have a radio, I don't have a TV in my room. I don't check the TV most of the time. Like, nyezo marumas abantu bane corona but and then yabona abantu bafaka mask but mina like angakaiboni TV.
He's heard rumors. He's seen people wearing masks, but he hasn't come to the reality that it's there. So he just sees people wearing masks. He doesn't have the knowledge, and he still doesn't believe this thing is happening. Yeah.
Getting food to people during this crisis has become crucial to prevent people from going hungry. But many in this township live below the poverty line, and there simply isn't enough to go around.
I recycle bottles, metal, cold drink caps, you see. And now since like this thing it was happening for these 21 days, we are struggling enough, you see. We don't we survive by this thing, understand? Yeah, nobody can come to you and help you, give you something to eat. And now these people they expect us to be inside the house. Now how can we sit inside the house without having anything to eat?
COVID-19 has killed thousands around the world, and it's now reached townships. Residents here are worried.
I got 2 weeks I stay at home. My colleagues say I must stay at home because I must be safe with my grandchildren and my children. The coronavirus is dangerous.
Community workers are hoping their efforts will help prevent a catastrophe in Alexandra. Testing has intensified here to detect further cases of COVID-19. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, the city of Cape Town has begun to move people living on the streets to the first of many planned temporary shelter sites. The move comes as the city's Community Services and Health Department work to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. CGTN's Travis Andrews has more.
While the country remains in lockdown to curb the spread of the coronavirus, there hasn't been many options available to the city's homeless when it comes to complying. But authorities have now begun to move at least some of them to a temporary inner-city shelter, complete with tents, sanitation facilities, as well as food. More importantly, this is regarded as a safe space, where everyone who enters has to first undergo a check for any COVID-19 symptoms.
Done screening inside, and we also put up some tents so that we can put the homeless people in the tents. There are those who are still on the hotspots. We also waiting for them to come. When we're done with this, we said they must stay visible where they are so that the law enforcement can go into all the hotspots and collect them.
More than 200 people are being cared for here, including refugees, the smaller tents being set up, or isolation units for those showing symptoms and may need immediate isolation. For many here, everyone's health is of primary concern. The city is enforcing strict COVID-19 mitigation measures here at this safe space, and that includes masks, gloves on, and hand sanitizer. Not only are one's hands constantly sanitized, but social distancing is also strictly enforced, as police keep a close eye over proceedings.
We screen them for the symptoms and the history before taking them in. Should any individual then present with a positive symptom, we immediately isolate them away from the other individuals. Critically here, we must be mindful of the fact that these individuals who may have fever or may have cough may also have other comorbidities that need to be tested for. And so we're working with NGOs who will be able to assist in the screening process.
There are other temporary shelters that have also been identified for the use of street people and refugees and are currently being sanitized so that they can be ready to receive the city's most vulnerable as soon as possible. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
In Nigeria, health experts are worried that a lack of access to clean water for millions of people threatens efforts to contain the coronavirus outbreak. Here's CGTN's Phil Ihaza with more from the nation's capital, Abuja.
It's the only source of water these riders have to wash their motorcycles. Unclean sources of water like this are common in rural Nigeria. Health experts are now warning that if Nigeria has a hope of combating coronavirus, it urgently needs a supply of clean water for everyone.
We are now at a period where the whole world is ravaged by coronavirus, and the simplest and most effective means of preventing coronavirus is hand washing, and with soap and water. So access to water is not negotiable. Governments have to wake up to their responsibilities and make water available for people in order to be able to wash their hands.
An estimated 55 million Nigerians lack access to safe water pumps or reservoirs. That's according to WaterAid Nigeria. While 75% of the urban population have access to treated and better quality water, only about 42% of households have access to safe water in rural areas. Experts say the central government alone can't tackle the problem. It requires a more collective effort.
This is the time where we need to come together. Management and prevention of coronavirus is everybody's business. So it is good that you are bringing this up. So NGOs, international organizations, charity organizations should come up with a way of providing water to those communities that lack access to water.
The Nigerian government recently secured a loan for various water projects worth over $124 million from the African Development Bank. The plan is to roll out universal access to water and sanitation by 2030.
Nearly 200 million people in Nigeria are at risk of coronavirus if nothing is done to provide them with water supplies. And while the government is urging them to wash their hands, it's not going to be that easy for people who don't have access to clean water. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
common struggle for countries dealing with the COVID-19 outbreak is to raise awareness while fighting misinformation. In Egypt, media outlets are sending out unified messages about the virus. These messages are broadcast throughout the day on TV and radio channels. Here's Adel Mahroui with more.
When it comes to COVID-19, it doesn't matter if you watch public or private broadcasters in Egypt. Everyone is sending a unified message. The same awareness videos and preventive measures gets aired all day long in what appears to be a government-orchestrated effort.
For right now, it seems to be a blessing because there is a coordinated effort. And don't forget that Egypt is a very large country with 100 million people. And, you know, you really want to fight misinformation, ignorance, which we have a lot of. The government started off with the awareness campaign. It was early. It was maybe before we had just a few cases in Egypt, and it has been wide. It has been spread on broadcast, both radio, television, particularly also print.
To keep viewers engaged, some producers had a creative take. With attractive music, simple lyrics, and colorful wardrobe, they've presented songs about COVID-19. Some have urged people to stay at home. Others have dictated hygienic measures to be taken at home.
If you're really well educated and cosmopolitan and exposed, you might think they're just silly. But, you know, there are a whole lot of people and children too who need simpler messages. I've seen similar ones where they had, you know, people dressed up in costumes and singing, you know, go away virus or wash your hands 20 seconds. And I think that's okay because really in the end, your mission as a media person right now is a little bit different to the usual, and you are really trying to devote your time to public health. This is a public health issue.
Since February, news about instabilities in neighboring countries and the nation's fight against terrorism faded away. COVID-19 has been leading headlines in Egypt.
COVID-19 has become Egypt's prime enemy. The government is imposing a partial curfew nationwide. With millions of Egyptians staying at home, the media's role is crucial to keep the public informed about the outbreak. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
In Uganda, some people are accusing sections of the media of spreading misinformation on the coronavirus pandemic. Media analysts say the rush to break news that could be misleading is scaring the public. Isabel Nakiria reports.
It's close to the news hour in this newsroom, and journalists here are trying to hit the deadline. And the coverage of the coronavirus pandemic is putting journalists on alert. The urgency to put out information fast, according to some analysts, is causing panic.
Some of the journalists have been a little too excited. They want to beat, the Ministry of Health, to this story. Perhaps, announcing phantom cases that are not there and doing things that in many regards can be misconstrued or can be even actually seen as being unethical.
Social media has been very popular, with popping out latest incidences of COVID-19 cases and at times hiking numbers. But the social media space is used by anybody, and relying on it has also caused confusion. Social media campaigners say media groups need to quickly correct this.
If there is a vacuum, then people who are not necessarily meant to be commentating about something end up filling that void. So the simple solution is that media houses need to be active on these platforms. They need to get their staff to be active, to distribute all the right information, the correct and accurate information that is being brought to us by the scientists on the latest that is happening with the virus.
In Uganda, updates about new COVID-19 cases are announced by the Ministry of Health and the WHO. But incidences about possible death of coronavirus patients has raised concern. Uganda has so far not recorded any COVID-19 deaths. Infectious disease experts warn false alarms about the coronavirus hinders efforts in the fight against the disease. They encourage people to protect themselves against the virus by arming themselves with the correct information. Media experts blame such alarmist reports to lack of proper research.
I've seen, different accounts from different people saying that possibly this story, the people who should have taken point on it should be, the science journalists. But you ask yourself, in Uganda, have we built capacity in regards to science journalism? Do we have a critical mass of science journalists who can ably tell this story? Because it's a very complex story. There are so many layers, that you have to unpack.
While some religious leaders have been arrested for spreading harmful information in relation to the coronavirus in Uganda, experts say the media must play its role of educating the public about the disease rather than being part of the problem. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Let's now catch up with the day's business news, and for that we cross over to Ramah.
Thank you very much, Penina. Here's what's coming up in business. African governments are teaming up with tech giants to fight misinformation through social media. And Egypt has revised its economic growth forecast downwards due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Governments here on the continent are teaming up with tech giants, including Facebook and Twitter, to try and fight misinformation around COVID-19 on a broad range of social media platforms. Public health authorities are concerned that posts purporting to highlight cures and products to protect people against this virus will drive up infection rates on a continent that's beset by crumbling health facilities.
The online space has been littered with various versions of suspicious information on government's efforts to manage the spread of COVID-19 among the global population. In Nigeria's commercial city of Lagos, some residents responded to a misleading message claiming the government was due to spray coronavirus chemicals from a jet, and they called on people to stay indoors, take off their clothes and belongings outside.
Reading this kind of message, it was really disturbing, and a lot of people believed it. A lot of people believed it, and it was a big problem for me. I had to start telling people around me that, look, don't believe this message. It is not real. It's not possible for the government to spray from the top. If they really want to do it, they are going to come into the community and spray within the community.
If people are passing any false information concerning the virus, then I think we need to educate people, the society more on that, and how to take precautions.
In Nigeria, where most of the country's 200 million inhabitants live on less than $1 a day, what is considered a cheap way to beat the virus may be appealing. But for those for whom clean water, hand sanitizer and soap are out of reach, they are exposed to possible false options.
Definitely in times of crisis, you'll find one or two people up to some tricks, so spreading rumors about what can cure the virus, what cannot cure the virus, what is going to happen at night. They're going to spray insecticide at night and whatnot. Definitely these things happen in times of crisis.
Tech giant Facebook now has some of its members monitoring content globally. And third-party fact-checkers also monitoring posts in Nigeria's main languages, including Hausa, Yoruba, and Igbo.
This is a global crisis at the moment, and we are taking particular steps to support global efforts. But it is an issue that we see across the world and across all issues. It is unfortunate that some people use our platform for negative activities, but we are working very hard. We have always made a commitment not to accept that sort of content on our platform, and we're working very hard to make sure that it stays off our platform.
In partnership with Nigeria's Center for Disease Control, Facebook is working to ensure accurate information approved by the Global Health Organizations is sent to WhatsApp users in notifications, and the NCDC posts information at the top of Facebook feeds. Meanwhile, some African governments are also resorting to punitive measures. In Kenya, at least 2 men, including a popular blogger, have been arrested for publishing false information about the virus. South Africa introduced a law in March that makes sharing malicious falsehoods about the virus punishable by up to 6 months in jail. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Elsewhere, Egypt's planning ministry has revised its economic growth forecast for this financial year. The ministry is now forecasting GDP growth of just 5.1% instead of the earlier figure of 5.6%. This, of course, does come as COVID-19 is hitting not just the Egyptian economy, but the global economy pretty hard. CGTN's Adel Ehmarouki reports.
The Egyptian Ministry of Planning says the outbreak would slow down GDP growth to 5.2% in Q3 and 4% in Q4. In average, the gross domestic product should grow by 5.1%, down from 5.6%, which has been already a lower figure than the 6% projected in this year's budget.
Two givens have affected that projection. The first is the global recession we are seeing, and Egypt is affected by that. The second is domestic and is caused by the curfew that has led to a sharp drop in production in industries and companies. Sectors like tourism have completely stopped. All of these negatively affect the GDP.
There are more concerns about the next fiscal year, which starts in July. Egypt at best is expecting GDP growth of around 4.5% if the virus impact on the economy is contained by June. Shall it stretch into the new fiscal year, that speculation could be cut to just 3%.
Coronavirus is the greatest threat to global economy. The world after corona will definitely be different. We are seeing a chain of crises. Gold prices are rising. Crude is dropping. We haven't seen these numbers in decades. We are probably entering the worst crisis since the Second World War. All of this made us realize that we won't see the growth we hoped for in Egypt during the next year.
The government had initially hoped for a 6% growth in the 2020-2021 fiscal year. COVID-19 could slash that figure into half, and no one knows how hard the virus can still hit. So the government has to be flexible in amending its best case, worst case scenarios. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
But more positive news now. Somalia is set to receive a relief of roughly 67% of the debt it owes to the Paris Club of Creditor Nations. Now, that decision came after the club decided to restructure the Horn of Africa nation's debt, and that includes cancelling about $1.4 billion that's due. Several of Somalia's creditors, that includes the United Kingdom, the United States and Norway, as well as the World Bank and the IMF, endorsed that decision during negotiations. Now, separate bilateral discussions with the creditors will be held to finalize the process. The IMF has further announced that several creditors will grant Somalia additional debt relief. 100% debt cancellation deals with some countries is possible under the IMF's heavily indebted Poor Countries Initiative, or HIPIC, it's more commonly referred to in these circles. Somalia is the 37th country to qualify for relief under this program. In South Africa, the state power utility Eskom has told independent producers of wind-generated power that it will essentially be declaring force majeure on their power purchase contracts due to a lack of demand for electricity. Now, since the start of South Africa's lockdown, energy demand has plummeted as businesses and mines close completely or go into care and maintenance, greatly reducing demand for electricity. From Johannesburg, here's CGTN's Angelo Coppola.
The announcement by Eskom essentially means that due to a situation beyond their control, it doesn't need all the power from wind producers in the late evening and early morning due to low demand.
The difference here is that the wind power contributes mainly in the early hours of the morning, like 2 a.m., when there's very little demand for electricity. Whereas the solar power contributes during the day when there is normal demand. So there is no discussion, there is no plan, and there is no point at all at this point in extending this force majeure to any other IPPs.
COVID-19 has led to a substantial drop in demand. 9,500 megawatts less power is being consumed during the peak hours at the moment.
Eskom really has got, you might say, too much generation capacity and not enough what is called flexible generation capacity. The coal-fired power stations are not very flexible, and they're also very intermittent. They come on and off sort of randomly as a result of failures.
The relationship between Eskom and the independent power producers is bound by watertight contracts.
We are in a partnership with our suppliers, and we have given them ample notice that this may, we need to repeat this again, and we've made it clear to them that it's a low probability event. So there is no need for pushback.
The power purchase agreement defines the contractual agreement between the utility and the IPPs.
It also depends on the goodwill between the parties to the contract. I mean, it makes little sense in these times to stick to the letter of a contract, you know, when there is a national emergency. I think the parties need to be reasonable, and they need to show that they are being reasonable.
They will be given an additional day for however many hours they have lost in a production day. So everybody will be exactly in the same position they would have been had there been no force majeure. Nobody will be left worse off.
The force majeure will test the relationship between the suppliers and the utility. Bottom line is, though, that everybody has to show goodwill so that we can get through this crisis together. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And in Tunisia, in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic and the explosion in demand for surgical masks, a fashion designer has now turned her atelier into a workshop to produce face masks. Here, around 2,000 medical masks are dispatched daily to hospitals that desperately need them. CGTN's Alexander Majala has this report.
Kalaud Gusmi has been a fashion designer for years. Her small atelier is based in Tunis, Tunisia's capital. After the COVID-19 pandemic hit, the North African nation was hit by a shortage of face masks. It was then that the designer decided to take a break from the fashion world to produce hundreds of face masks.
Because of the spread of the coronavirus, face masks are not available at pharmacies. I thought I can use my atelier to produce these masks at the same time by utilizing my biology degree in order to make these masks available in pharmacies and hospitals.
Gusmi's masks are made from durable fabric and are reusable. She dispatches the products daily to hospitals and pharmacies struggling to match demand. She started making the masks very recently and financed the project herself.
This is an example of the face masks we produce. We use non-woven fabric to make them. As you can see, there are 2 layers so that the masks are more effective. The material itself is breathable as it has small openings and an internal layer functioning as a protective shield. This is more effective than the masks sold at pharmacies because the latter is used once, then discarded. We can wash this mask and reuse it.
Different organizations have already caught wind of the social enterprise and pitched in to fund the small workshop of 30 tailors. So far, she has distributed 8,000 masks. Her workshop churns out between 1,000 to 1,500 masks every day. The goal is to produce more than 10,000 masks in upcoming weeks. Tunisia, which suffers from limited health infrastructure, is fighting to contain the outbreak after it said it had over 275 cases and 8 deaths. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
And I'll leave you there for the time being. Later on at the top of the hour, the coronavirus pandemic is expected to drastically cut growth right across the continent to below 1%, and it's going to push unemployment lower by anywhere between 30 to 40%. We'll have the details and the latest assessment from the United Nations Economic Commissioner for Africa at 1800 GMT. See you then. For now, back to Beneda.
Thank you, Rama. You're watching Africa Live. We've got plenty coming up, including COVID-19 puts a break on traditional wedding ceremonies in Uganda.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In a bid to help control the spread of the coronavirus, Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni suspended all gatherings, including traditional weddings. That has come as a huge blow to many couples who have been planning their wedding ceremonies. As CGTN's Leon Senyanga reports, one pair is still holding on to their love.
For Dawn and Stella, 28th March 2020 was supposed to be a beautiful day. The couple was due for their traditional wedding after more than 7 years together.
I was already at campus, basically, and she was in school, in high school, but she was a close friend to me, and it turned in me being more of a family to them. I used to go to their home.
But their wedding did not happen. A nationwide suspension of all gatherings ruined their plans. The announcement came just days before the couple was due to wed.
I didn't expect that to come because it was just in a week's time, so it was unexpected. And I was surprised when I heard that no functions, no nothing.
Uganda is under partial lockdown for 2 weeks. A curfew has also been imposed. That has put a stop to a number of social gatherings that had been scheduled to take place during this time. And many people are already counting their losses. Large wedding parties are a significant cultural event in Uganda. Family members and friends gather to celebrate. And a great deal of effort and money goes into the planning.
We do meetings, so family members and friends come around and you go through the budget, they contribute. So it's really hard to tell them we are doing something small. So that comes with cutting the number of the people you're going to invite, yet they gave you the money.
The couple has decided to push back their big day.
We're thinking about June, July 17th, that will be her birthday. So we were like, okay, it was going to be on my birthday. So because of this, let's think about the wedding on the 17th July, which will be your birthday at the same time. Those are two special days at the same time. But then our worry still stands that the situation is not yet stable as we thought maybe.
While an end date for the pandemic is far from clear, making plans is risky, and couples like Dawn and Stella could be waiting for a long time to come. Leon Sanyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
In Guinea, the government has decided to cancel all public cultural events involving more than 100 people. This is part of efforts to curb the spread of the coronavirus. CGTN's Tuli Shabalala takes a look at how the measures have impacted the entertainment scene in the West African country.
Social-cultural events in Guinea-Conakry generate thousands of dollars. Now the country's entertainment industry is set to make a huge financial loss due to the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. Promoters of shows, artists and the Guinea media are the ones feeling the pinch the most.
When there is a stop at these cultural events, that means that we have no advertisers, that we have no customers, and that will impact economically on our financial profitability, therefore impoverish our accounting. If this health crisis continues, it will be a big loss for us.
All live shows have been cancelled. It's only activities that bring together less than 50 people that have been held today. The room is large enough to respect the safety distance measures.
Some promoters or showbiz companies had already made financial commitments. They doubt that they will be reimbursed later.
I had already invested a lot of money by buying airline tickets from foreign artists, and at the last minute I was told I will not be able to make a profit to be able to afford another financial base to allow me to continue to do the festival. We accept it because it is a public health problem, but in reality, the state should accompany us after the cancellation. If this is not done, our structures will no longer be able to cope with this loss.
The first case of coronavirus disease was declared in Guinea on the 12th of March from a lady from Belgium. The government has taken steps to close the country's borders to limit the spread of the disease. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
Coming up in sports, South Africa hockey teams to wait longer for Olympic Games return.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
We start in South Africa, where the men and women's hockey